Nietzsche. How to live when nothing matters. Suppose you wake up tomorrow, and every important word feels hollow. Love, purpose, duty are grass empty shells making familiar sounds. Suppose the compass breaks, and the horizon is a blank wall. What stays your hand from folding quietly into the dark? Most people never touch the truth long enough to feel its temperature. Friedrich Nietzsche did. He did not meditate on nihilism like an abstract storm hovering far off. He walked out into it with a bare head and called the weather by its name. He said, with a kind of fierce pity, that we had killed the very sun that once gave our meanings heat. Not killed a person. Killed an idea that had stood so long it felt like the sky itself. And then he asked, not how to go back, but how to live forward. How to live when no commandment echoes from beyond the human throat. How to live when nothing matters, unless you decide to make it matter. Look at the image that the century gave him. A man carrying a lantern in the bright noon, crying that the light had gone out. Of course, people laughed. The market was busy. People were bored. But what happens when the laughter stops at night? When the noise recedes and the door clicks shut, and you are left with your breath, your pulse, and the quietly humming question, what grounds your choice to stay? Nietzsche was not a preacher. He despised pulpits. He was a delicate man with ruined eyesight and headaches like knives, who wrote to survive his own solitude. He was, by every ordinary measure, unfit for the roles we give to prophets. He had no congregation, no health, no comfort, no steady love. What he had, at times, was a view lean, brilliant, and dangerous, seen from the high paths above Sils Maria, where the air thins and language lifts like a hawk, and where he wrote sentences like a man building a new instrument to defy the airless silence after the old music dies. If you imagine him as a destroyer, you miss the point. The rubble was already there, hidden behind borrowed certainties. He believed that the old structures of value had been hollowed out by habit and politeness, that belief had become manners, and that we had kept the furniture of faith without the fire. He wanted to strip the room bare, so that if we built again, we would build knowingly. He was a doctor of a sick age, and his diagnosis had two words. We are tired. Tiredness is the smile that says, whatever. It is how nothing matters, not as a scream, but as a shrug. He watched Europe sink into cleverness and cynicism and thought, this is not peace. This is numbness. This is what comes when ideals degenerate into slogans for comfort. When heaven is gone, we console ourselves with convenience. We invent the last man who blinks, who wants warmth without fire, who confuses safety with truth. He predicted this little god of comfort, and he despised him, not because he loved suffering for its own sake, but because he believed that life asked more of us than contentment. That life, if it is to be worthy of the name, must be affirmed like a storm is affirmed, faced, danced with, not merely avoided. But here is the trouble. If nothing matters by itself, if there is no absolute measure, why not simply float? Why not spend your days putting soft things between yourself and the rawness of being alive? Why not settle? Nietzsche looked at that temptation like a chemist looks at a sedative. He measured its effects on the soul. Comfort makes us sleepy. Sleep makes us harmless. And harmlessness disguised as goodness breeds resentment. The energy we don't use to create our lives curdles. It looks for a target. We then call our weakness virtue and label whatever is strong as corrupt. He saw this everywhere in politics, in moral talk, in praise of humility, It was really a disguised envy. It is human. It is ordinary. And if we do not call it by its name, it rules us. The question is not whether nothing matters in the old way. The question is what to do with the space that opens when the old roof burns off. Nietzsche's answer was both simple and hard. You become the source. You learn to write law on your heart and call it good, not because some authority grants it, but because you accept the creative risk of making value. He called this terrible generosity the will to power, not domination, not cruelty, but the urge of life to grow, to stylize, to intensify, to shape the raw material of experience into form. This is where most people step back. Make your own values? It sounds like a license for chaos, for narcissism, for whatever I want. But Nietzsche's demand was sterner than whim. He wanted a life you could answer for, a style you could carry, a pattern of choices so deliberate that if a demon told you you were condemned to live the same life again and again, you could say yes. He called that thought the heaviest weight. This is not a metaphor to admire from afar. It is a test you take alone at night. Would you will this life once more? If the answer is no, then the work is clear. Change it until the answer is yes. The first time you hear this, it sounds insane. Who can love their pain enough to live it again? Nietzsche would say, you do not love pain. You love the totality. You do not sanctify every blow. You bless the pattern that makes you capable of absorbing it without lying to yourself about what happened. A more fati love of fate, not as passive acceptance, but as the active gesture of a fighter who chooses their battlefield. You cannot pick every event. You can decide what you do with what arrives. Some will accuse him of advocating cruelty or selfishness, but he wanted severity first toward oneself. He wanted people capable of surprise, patience, irony, laughter that does not hide bitterness. He wanted, above all, spiritual athletes who could stand without anesthesia in front of the emptiness of the world and make something beautiful anyway. So we begin here with this risky generosity. Nothing matters unless you decide it does, unless you endow it with meaning through the discipline of creation. The old command is gone. The new task is self-legislation, not as a tantrum against limits, but as an art of living. He understood the cost. He lost friendships, almost lost his mind, certainly lost his place in the comfortable houses where compromise lives. But he also found something that modern people often treat as mythical, a ground that isn't a ground, a clarity that is not certainty, a yes that does not need to be defended by dogma because it is enacted day by day, like breathing. If you listen closely to the way he writes, quick, piercing, then suddenly tender, you hear not a destroyer, but a man who wanted us to become worthy of the loss of the old sky. Not to make a new sky, but to learn how to walk without one. He gives no recipe, only instruments. A hammer to test idols, an ear to hear the hollow ring, a mirror to catch yourself pretending, and one dangerous thought that waits for you at the end of the day. If your life were a sentence, would you sign your name again? You will notice the absence of comfort in this beginning. That is on purpose. Comfort is not the enemy. It is the counterfeit. If the words here make you feel unease, that is the doorway to freedom. Step through and keep walking. In the next turn of the path, the air will thin. We will follow the man who went ahead, who broke with his masters, who wrote under stormlight, and who believed, with a stubborn, miraculous seriousness, that human beings could be more than bored animals in a well-lit room. Before he rejected all the easy heavens, Nietzsche had idols of his own. He was a prodigy, a professor at 24, a child of the Prussian plains, the son of a pastor who died when Nietzsche was 5. He loved discipline, music, the clean edge of classical verse. He fell for a time under the spell of Wagner, that architect of sound who built cathedrals of feeling for a post-religious age. He thought art might replace faith. He thought beauty could do what belief had done. But Wagner's stage was crowded with the ghosts of old gods. Nietzsche smelled the incense beneath the orchestra, and what had dazzled him began to sicken him. He left. He broke, publicly and completely, with the man who had promised him a temple, because he wanted something harder than worship: honesty. He resigned his chair at Basel, crippled by illness, went wandering through Italy and Switzerland as a half-invalid with a pen like a scalpel, dissecting the body of morality. He learned something dangerous in those years, that morality is not a hovering truth, but a story many stories told by a species to itself. Some stories enlarge us, others imprison us. He looked with a glare at the pieties of his time and traced their veins back to impulses we prefer not to admit. He spoke of resentment, a word you can taste like rust, the long, slow anger of the weak, disguised as justice. He argued that when we cannot become strong, we invent a morality that declares our weakness good and the strength of others evil. He said that the great inversion at the heart of certain moral traditions was not a revelation from beyond, but a brilliant, human, all too human revolution from below. It is easy to misunderstand this as cruelty. Nietzsche's target was not compassion, but the sweet narcotic that takes its name. He feared a pity that keeps others small so we can feel large. He stood on the boundary between care and contempt and tried to find the strange middle path. Love for people who are becoming, severity for those parts of us that prefer sleep over growth. His style reflects the work. There are no systems, only fragments, aphorisms, strikes of lightning in a black room. He mistrusted theories that lock the door from the inside. He wanted weapons, not furniture. In this, he was modern long before the word had a posture. He believed the truth is alive, that it moves, that our descriptions are perishable, like bread. This is why he practices genealogy, not the kind that finds your ancestors, but the kind that asks a value where it came from and who it serves. Take the word good. It looks innocent, like a newborn. He follows it back through history and finds it dressed in other clothes, noble, strong, pure. Then he tracks its transformation. How the good becomes what the powerless can get others to accept as good through reinterpretation, through the long patience of those with no other weapon. He records not to shame, but to show the moving parts. When you see the gears, you are less likely to worship the machine. What bothered him was not that people preferred certain values. It was that they pretended those values descended like rain. Think about how a culture talks when it wants to police desire. The language grows lofty. Duty speaks in thunder. The ground trembles. Nietzsche takes a hammer to it and listens. If the sound rings hollow, he smiles and keeps tapping. The first tap is to God, not the God of philosophers, clouded in abstractions, but the God of warm kitchens, of Christmas candles, of the familiar bond between the moral order and the cosmos. He says that God is dead not to gloat, but as a coroner. The body lies there among the garlic and the sadness. We did this not because we invented bombs or wrote angry pamphlets, but because we became too honest. Science, historical criticism, comparative religion the entire habit of questioning, these were daggers. We have not yet understood the blood on our hands. There is a second tap, softer but deeper. He probes the heart of the human animal and finds a chaos that is not a defect but a resource. We are not one thing, we are many. We are drives at war, a parliament of wild appetites. The story we tell of ourselves as unified moral subjects is a beautiful lie. We become ourselves by staging these appetites, by channeling them, by giving them a direction that becomes a style. The will to power is the name he gives to this unstoppable push within life to shape itself, to overgrow and prune, to stretch. Power is not a goon with a gun. It is a vine reaching for light. The suspense sharpens here, because what he says next is almost intolerable. There is no foundation beneath this floor. There is no metaphysical guarantee. You are the builder and the building. In this space, two temptations appear. The first is passive nihilism, slow drowning. Everything disappoints, so we keep still. We drink more, scroll more, talk about justice while doing nothing. Call the world stupid to hide our own surrender. The second is violent certainty. New gods dressed in modern clothes, ideological heavens, promising a clean moral landscape if only we purge, punish, submit. Nietzsche feared both, because both are refusals of the risk of creation. Both relieve you of the burden of your own breath. He offers not a program, but a training. Learn to suspect your noblest words. Ask your tenderness who it makes small. Ask your rage what debt it is trying to collect. Ask your humility whether it hides a hunger to be admired for being humble. This sounds like a cynical project. It is not. Suspicion is a discipline, not a posture. The point is to free energy, not to drown in self-consciousness. The pressure builds. A whole continent shudders between exhausted belief and ugly fanaticism. Nietzsche, writing alone in rented rooms with the shutters half closed, sees the shadow of the last man and invents a counter-image. Not a leader with banners. A type. A possibility. A person who makes values the way an artist chisels stone. You can call him the overhuman, but that name has collected so many mistakes that it crumbles in the hand. Think instead of someone who orders their chaos into form and calls it a life, who takes their wounds as raw material, who refuses the narcotics of resentment, who learns to affirm. Toward the end of his sane years, he imagines a messenger who steps out of a grove at midday with a thought like heat. What if you had to live this again? The demon whispers. The man sweats. The sunlight waits. The thought is not cruel. It is honest. If it terrifies you, that terror is data. If it excites you, that excitement is a compass. Either way, it is a way of measuring a life without recourse to heaven or hell. All this would be theatrics if he had not tried to live it. He had the advantages of no one and the stubbornness of a mountain. He scraped by on a small pension, wrote for no audience, ate poorly, suffered pain that would have sent most to bed, and kept at the work of hammering out a way to live when nothing outside your chest tells you you are doing it right. We have not yet arrived at the tenderness inside this hardness, or the joy inside the discipline, or the laughter that chases away the stink of sermon. We are still in the narrow pass, with cliffs on both sides, sensations heightened, no easy path down. Keep walking. He will offer not a system, but a dance step. 3 metamorphoses of the spirit. He will show us how to carry, then how to say no, then how to say yes in a new way. He will show us how to transfigure necessity into choice. He will make us imagine art as ethics. and he will do it with a paradox. To be fully free, choose your chains. Think of the spirit as a creature in 3 acts. First, a camel kneeling, loaded with weight. Tradition, expectation. The heavy thou shalt. We take these burdens on because they make us strong. We train under someone else's law, learn the arc of discipline, acquire a back that can bear. This is not servitude. It is apprenticeship. The camel walks into the desert and learns thirst. Then the lion appears. He roars, "I will." He slashes at the dragons, whose scales glitter with eternal "Thou shalt." He refuses the inherited. He breaks his old masters. He clears a space. The lion is necessary because the world is thick with inertia, because the values you were handed may be too small for your breathing. But the lion cannot create. He can only say no. And finally, the child. The child is not naive. He is possibility without bitterness. He plays. He says yes. He creates values from the ground up, not because he has forgotten the dragon, but because he has made peace with the desert. He can draw the first line of a new game and laugh as he learns the rules he is inventing. This sequence is not a one-time initiation. It repeats at each threshold where a life begins anew. It is not a parable to admire on a coffee mug. It is a description of the muscles you will need if you are to live without borrowed absolutes. The camel trains, the lion clears, the child creates. In this cycle, nothing matters by default, but everything can be made to matter through the gravity of your attention. Nietzsche calls this power to create style, not a fashion accessory, but a coherence of form that turns a life into a work of art. To cultivate a style is to select, to emphasize, to write your days like sentences with rhythm, with risk, with deliberate roughness where smoothness would be a lie. He considered himself a good stylist, not because he had pretty sentences, but because he demanded from words what he demanded from himself. Intensity, clarity, humor. He places art in the position ethics used to occupy, not because he wants beauty to excuse cruelty, but because he believes art teaches the only reliable lesson after the death of metaphysical guarantees, that meaning is made, not found. The Apollonian form, order, restraint meets the Dionysian ecstasy, flux, chaos. Tragedy, for him, is not a sad story. It is the highest art because it says yes to the whole. We watched a hero fall and called it beautiful, not because we delight in suffering, but because we recognize in the fall an energy greater than the crash. The opera of life, stripped of sugary consolation, becomes bearable because we are composing it. Now, the ground shifts beneath your feet. Meaning is not an objective thing you pick off a shelf. It is the byproduct of an organism asserting its form in a world of other forms. The will to power is not a tyrant. It is the way a seed breaks soil. It is the way you choose friends, work, words. It is the way you say no to the TV at midnight and yes to the book that makes you feel stupid and alive. It is the way you decide that your tendency to mock is a cheap reflex and that you would rather grow the strength to praise without flattery. He gives you tests, not rules. Here is one. Does this choice increase your range? Not your possessions, your range. Your capacity to feel, to act, to endure. To stand uncertainty without clutching at a false certainty. Here is another. Could you repeat this action without secretly hoping to be praised for it? Self-overcoming means not living as a performance for an imagined judge, but as a practice that makes you sharper in the places you care to be sharp. Perspectivism is the name he gives to his epistemology, that is, his way of knowing. there is no view from nowhere. Every claim, including this one, is spoken from a body on a day with a history. This does not make truth impossible. It makes arrogance impossible. We do not abandon truth. We become more modest about our angles. We seek richer perspectives, not because we worship plurality, but because we want a fuller grip. We know the dangerous relief that comes from a single clean explanation. We decline it. We opt for the burden of complicated seeing. The heaviest of his tests sits at noon like a rock. Eternal recurrence. Imagine the demon's whisper as not a metaphysical claim about cosmology, but as a way of feeling the weight of your choices. Live as if your days will come back exactly as they were, down to the flavor of your coffee and the way you spoke to the cashier. Does that make you want to gnash your teeth or laugh with madness? This is not guilt. This is gravitas. You measure your life not against an abstract ideal, but against the thought of wanting it again. Amor fati fits here. Love your fate, not with passive cow-eyed acceptance, but with the active irony of one who says, I would not have chosen this, but since this is what has occurred, I will incorporate it into my yes. This requires strength that is rare. It requires a memory that does not deny and a hope that does not delude. It requires, most of all, the substitution of gratitude for complaint, not because you owe the universe anything, but because complaint shrinks your range and gratitude expands it. He is not urging you to become a solitary mountain. He is urging you to choose companions who intensify your intensity. Friendship for Nietzsche is not therapy. It is collision. A friend is someone who does not let you get away with your prettiest lies. He preferred harsh teachers to gentle flatterers. He wanted, as a friend, someone before whom you could not pose. If your relationships are mirrors of your virtues, you are in danger. Seek those who unsettle your vanity, who make you awkward, who compel you to grow. And the body is not contemptible meat for him. It is the seat of intelligence. The smartest thoughts, he suggests, are gut feelings trained by experience. He mistrusted ascetic ideals because they smelled like revenge against the flesh. He loved dance, not necessarily the skill, but what dance represents. A lightness atop necessity, a buoyancy that comes only after gravity is acknowledged. He imagined his highest wisdom as a form of laughter, not because he thought everything trivial, but because laughter is evidence of a soul that has survived itself. How do you live when nothing matters? You cure it. You pick obligations the way a sculptor picks stone. You do not let guilt assign your projects. You let need choose them need, not as compulsion, but as the form your will to power takes. You write your own commandments in ordinary language. Wake at the hour that does not make you hate the day. Pick a labor that resists you. Fast from opinions for a week. Save up attention. Give away praise where you are stingy. Mock only what you could be. Read books that offend you in a way that makes you curious. Sleep with your phone in another room. Cultivate a private joy no one can reward you for. He would smirk at the domestication of his thought into lifestyle tips. But under the smirk, there would be respect for any practice that makes you less predictable to yourself. Because what he feared most was a life unexamined not by Socratic argument, but by the lack of projects that can test a person. He would have you seek storms your boat can weather. He would have you write paragraphs you can stand behind. He would have you be bored less and terrified more, because terror, if faced, turns into capacity. Boredom rarely transforms into anything but more boredom. All of this is difficult because it demands that you stop blaming the age for what you are refusing to attempt. He could never abide the complaint that times are bad. Times are always bad for those who need an excuse to be small. Times are good for those who have decided to be large. In this way, Nietzsche is almost embarrassingly cheerful. Under the thunder, there is a gambler's delight. The table has been cleared of old rules. What can we invent? Now we must speak gently, because to keep this energy alive without cruelty requires a tenderness that Nietzsche carried in secret. He was not a stranger to devastation. He fell in love and was refused. He was befriended and abandoned. He was sick most days of his life, and finally he broke. Whatever happened in Turin, which may be more myth than certain fact, a human went to pieces. His last decade was a blank window. His sister arranged his legacy like a shop window, and darker hands would later misuse his words to decorate horrors he would have despised. Despite the noise, listen for the man before the collapse. He wrote not from victory, but from being on the edge. He once stood beside a lake at Sils Maria and felt the thought of eternal recurrence fall upon him like a noon sun. He wrote, later, that he had never felt something so heavy and so bright. Imagine that scene as a small human moment. A man alone, a sky that does not care, a body that hurts, a mind that will not stop. He writes because writing is how he refuses despair. He is not an expert on happiness. He is a craftsman in meaning under pressure. You might be tempted to think his project is only for geniuses, for mountain dwellers, for misanthropes. It is not. It is for anyone who senses that the soul atrophies in safety. You can live this in a small apartment with a job you do not entirely love. You can live this in a suburb that smells like mowed grass. You can live this in a city that tries to sell you 40 different versions of the same thing every day. The practices do not have to be heroic. They have to be yours. The deepest emotional demand he makes is this: forgive reality. Not in the moral sense, but in the affectionate sense. Let the world be what it is. Stop asking it to be fair. Hopelessness is often a disguised demand for fairness. We say nothing matters when what we mean is, it does not matter in the way I fantasize it should. He invites us into a love that is harsher than hope and sweeter than resignation. Love of the world as and because it is cracked. He asks you to look at your suffering with a composure that does not deny. Most suffering is boring. It is headaches and paperwork, loneliness and awkward conversations, bills, rashes, awkwardness. There are grand griefs too, and they break us into languages we don't know. He does not romanticize pain. He just refuses to let it define the field. He wants to train this response. I will not waste this. If I walk through hell, I will bring back some flowers. This is not a therapy that guarantees relief. It is a dignity that does not wait for permission. The practices we spoke of earlier are tender not because they soften you, but because they put you back into relation with a reality that does not care about your narrative. You cannot charm gravity. You can learn to dance with it. Take eternal recurrence again, but hold it near your heart this time. You wake late. The phone is there, a small square of endless noise. You scroll. 10 minutes are gone. The demon whispers, "Would you do this again?" If yes, scroll. If no, put it down. This thought is not a police officer. It is a friend who tells you the truth because you asked. Repetition is not just a metaphysical curiosity. It is a daily fact. If you are bored today and you were bored yesterday, the pattern is repeating. If you feel small and secret and angry in all your conversations, the pattern is repeating. Nietzsche hands you a lever. If you could not bear to repeat this day, change one thing. A letter, a walk, a hard talk, a refusal, a yes. Amor fati is a weird love. It makes you embrace your scars without making you vain about them. It makes you find uses for your injuries other than collecting pity. He suggests a radical experiment. So arrange your life that even your misfortunes become part of your style. This does not mean staying in harm. It means extracting from harm a commitment to be more interesting than your wounds. You may ask, what of compassion? Contempt for the weak is a cheap hobby. Nietzsche was not an aristocrat of money. He was an aristocrat of spirit. Compassion for him, at its best, is not draped in sweetness. It is stern. It refuses to condescend. It sees the other as a fellow wrestler. It asks, how can I help you become strong enough to stop needing me? That is a form of love most of us are afraid to receive. There is a light that breaks through here. The light looks like laughter, a kind that comes after a long cough. He writes about the soul's highest state as a kind of smiling cruelty toward one's own pathos, the ability to laugh at our grand tragedies without becoming small. He speaks of dancing, of light feet. He distrusts those who are too serious, because heaviness is often a mask for laziness. To be light is not to be trivial. It is to be unburdened by pretense. The privacy of this task cannot be overemphasized. You may tell no one about it. You may make no content about it. You may sit on the floor with a notebook and do the one thing you are resisting most. You may apologize to someone without adding a but. You may take a risk that no one will applaud. You may become a secret more alive than you seem, less performative than is profitable. If this frightens you, good. If it makes you feel lonely, remember that the best companions are other people doing this quietly behind their faces. The world will not reward you with a badge. You will reward yourself with the capacity to look at your life and say, I chose this, and if I did not choose it, I made it mine. Finally, there is the matter of the overhuman, the person beyond. Abstract names corrupt the warm simplicity of the task. Think of it this way. The alternative to the last man is not the first tyrant. It is the first person who can love their fate enough to become interesting. It is the one who, instead of asking what the age will do for them, asks what they can do with the age to craft a worthy pattern. It is not a program for all time. It is a private victory you carry around like a well-kept secret. Those who meet you will not know why your presence feels like weather. They will not suspect how carefully you chose your words, your silences, your posture toward the unchangeable. When Nietzsche breaks, there is no romance in it. He is gone, but the notes he left are not the rantings of a madman. They are the blueprint of a hardness that knows how to be soft. He wanted beyond all the fighting to make of the human animal something hospitable to itself. He believed, in a scandalously old-fashioned way, that joy is possible. Not glee, not satisfaction, not fun. Joy. The kind that has looked blood in the eye and smiled. The kind that washes you clean without fluff. Imagine the marketplace again, the bright chatter, the easy jokes. A man with a lantern tries to warn you that the light has gone out, and everyone laughs because the sun is overhead. Then clouds gather. The laughter sounds thin. You step away from the crowd. You feel, beneath the chatter, a sheepish fear. What if the glow you've been using to see yourself was only neon? What if you have to learn to see in the dark? This is where Nietzsche places his hand on your shoulder and points to the simplest thing, the next thing you do. There are countless essays written about his ideas, infinite arguments about what he really meant. He would shrug. What do you intend to do with your afternoon? Will you live like the last person in a well-lit room? Blink? Consume? Avoid? Or will you experiment? Will you take the heaviest thought into your kitchen and let it make you better dishes, better conversations, better silence? There is a tenderness in that question that our era, with its addiction to outrage and distraction, struggles to receive. Everything seems designed to make you someone else's product. Nietzsche asks you to become your maker. Not your God, your maker. This is more frightening than it sounds, because it strips you of most excuses. It also frees you from every demand you never consented to. The cliff edge is here. There is no guarantee that you will succeed. There is no guarantee that your style will be admired, that your values will be reprinted in textbooks, that your projects will outlive you. He urges you to do it anyway, to craft something worthy of the one judge you cannot escape, the thought of having to live it again. Live such that, if the demon came at midnight, you could laugh and say, once more. Take stock without flinching. Where are you bored because you are hiding? Where are you angry because you are small? Where are you generous because you cannot bear to be admired? Where are you cruel because you want to punish what you cannot become? Where are you noble because you forgot to perform? These are the kinds of questions that make a person dangerous in the best way, because the answers make performance impossible. Do not romanticize your suffering, but stop apologizing for your ambition. Make the ambition sensible, not to be seen, but to form yourself into a vessel capable of gratitude. In a world that sells bitterness as virtue, gratitude is revolutionary. Gratitude not as politeness, but as a deep habit of saying yes, where no would be easier. Gratitude that gives you the strength to say no, when yes would be cowardice. The intricate dance. Begin small. Choose a task beneath praise. Clean a thing no one will know you cleaned. Write a paragraph you will never publish. Call someone to ask how they are, and then do not talk about yourself. Refuse a punishment you are about to hand down in your head. Read a page you have to reread 3 times. Lift a weight that scares you. Sleep when you said you would. Wake when you said you would. Make a plan and keep it long enough to discover that you are lying to yourself about how tough you are. Stop. Adjust. Try again. If you are looking for a grand purpose, Nietzsche will disappoint you. If you are hungry for a method to make your days dense with reality, he is a generous enemy of your laziness. He stands at the border and says, on the other side is not redemption. It is life. Do you want it? He does not promise you will like it. He promises only that if you learn to affirm it, the taste will become strange and beautiful. It is tempting, at this height, to turn his thought into a slogan. Avoid it. Slogans are the junk food of meaning. Keep his ideas feral. Let them bite you when you slip. Take only what you can use without pretending. If eternal recurrence feels theatrical to you today, use "would I repeat this morning?" If will to power tastes like arrogance on your tongue, try "what choice expands my range?" If amor fati sounds like Latin on a wall, try "what part of this day can I love without lying?" Return to the marketplace when you are ready. Smile at the noise. Buy what you must. Give money to the musician. Stand like a person who has secrets that are not shameful. Stand like a person who could live again. If this leaves you with the unsettled feeling that something important just shifted in your chest. That is the work. Let the shifting continue without needing to show it to anyone. Let yourself become more dignified than you were yesterday. Let your style deepen. Let your laughter get warmer. And if a thought arrives later, when the room is quiet, if some low voice asks you whether you could love your fate enough to make of it a life, do not rush to answer. Sit, breathe, then begin again at the sink, with the email, with the apology, with the plan, with the refusal, with the dance. The horizon is blank. The compass is in your hand. You are not alone. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.